I was on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire, so everybody knows what happened in Iowa. I think what people didn't realize was really the behind the scenes of like how much the DNC basically rigged it. I mean, to me, it goes beyond fraud. It requires like a criminal investigation. So basically, after the Iowa caucus, there was an investigation put together into what went wrong. And incidentally, the person investigating was a former U.S. attorney appointed by President Obama. So that was who was investigating.
No conflict of interest there.
No,
right.
What could go wrong?
So the investigation was so thorough that essentially the DNC did not cooperate. The DNC would not speak with the investigators. The investigators would not actually compel them to give over documents, emails, phone logs, anything. So when the report, air quotes, the report was released last week, at the same time the report was released, there was a closed session, which means closed to the public, meeting among the Iowa State Democratic Party. So, I've built up sources over the years on the campaign trail. So I was able, through some sources, to get my hands on the transcript from that private Iowa State party. And basically the attorney that was doing the investigation said a lot of things in that meeting that were not made public in the Politico report, which the Politico report kind of read like a DNC press release. So essentially what happened here was the Democratic National Committee basically, first of all, the Democratic National Committee wanted this app. Sources that I have indicated that they were pretty ticked off and not happy with how 2016 went, a little too close to comfort in terms of Bernie almost won Iowa. I mean, I would say he probably did. So they wanted to kind of muddy the waters a little bit. So they created an app, which never happened before, like for forever and ever. They just did it the old fashioned way. They called in via phone from the precincts. And
you need an app. You have to have an app. How could it be done without an app?
Right.
So
the DNC asked the state party to basically have a software developer create an app. The app was developed by veterans of Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, so no conflict of interest there. Then 2 weeks before the Iowa caucus, the DNC mandated that the app named Shadow, the company, create a whole new software so that the DNC could have access to the real-time raw numbers coming in the Iowa caucus.
Have they ever had that before? Why did they get that?
As far as I know, no. And as far as I know from talking to people involved with New Hampshire politics, Nevada, the DNC was not heavy-handed like that in those other states. They were not demanding to see the real-time numbers.
Right.
In America, even though I think it's a bad system anyway, the system's supposed to be each state is run by the state parties, not the DNC. So the DNC mandated that we want to see the numbers before they're made public. By the way, let's just remember, this wasn't in my story, but all of this happened at the same time, like for the first time, the Des Moines Register poll, which is kind of like the holy grail of Iowa politics.
Yeah.
Everybody, like political nerds, are waiting on the Saturday before the caucus for the final Des Moines Register poll. That inexplicably gets spiked because Pete Buttigieg complains that one person polled wasn't given Pete Buttigieg as a choice.
And who's to say that wasn't an inside job? Who's to say that actually happened?
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't.
Well, I can't say for certain, but I'll say that I'm pretty sure that if Bernie's campaign called the Des Moines Register and complained that one of our supporters was polled and not given us as an option, that the poll would have went out without a problem. And the poll was eventually leaked. It showed that Bernie was in first place, Pete was in third place. So we go to Iowa caucus night. This private meeting that I got the transcript of actually also revealed they actually had the results on the night of the caucus. They had the same results on the night of the caucus that ended up coming out 5 days later. It basically showed a tie between Buttigieg and Bernie, like one.
They stalled it.
Yeah. Basically, Perez told the state party, do not report the results because this software that the DNC made them create 2 weeks before the caucus, shocker, there was a coding error. So the DNC, the numbers they were getting were I guess wrong. But you got to backtrack. And James Sogby, who's been with the DNC for 28 years, he's a Bernie supporter. He said to me for the story, like, why did the DNC need to see the numbers?
Yeah.
Why didn't they just trust the state parties? So, I just report what I know. I've never heard of that before. I've never heard, I do know that, who else wants to see numbers before, like during elections? The mafia.
Yeah. Well,
like seriously, like JFK's election, the mafia was involved. That's just historical. Mexican drug cartels have wanted to see the real-time numbers so that they could intimidate voters at the polling places not to vote. I mean, this is just so. Yeah. Bottom line, Tom Perez blocked it. It was delayed for days. In that delay, Pete Buttigieg went out on the night of the caucus, claimed victory. Corporate media pushed this narrative that he won. I saw the the domino effect from there because in Iowa, where I went next, Pete got a 10% polling bump.
Yeah, because people don't realize the snowball effect of this. They don't understand that. It's like the one thing is not an isolated thing. It doesn't work that way. When you mess with Iowa, it messes the whole chain of events.
Well, I mean, honestly, to me, listen, Bernie's campaign made mistakes. Bernie made a lot of mistakes. I've addressed it with my audience. But at the end of the day, let's just say they reported the results on that night and it was basically a tie. So Pete Buttigieg can't go out like claiming victory because it's a tie. Oh, yeah. The media would have spun it. They would have said, wait a minute, Bernie should have won because he was close with whatever. But Pete Buttigieg does not get to do that. And I went to New Hampshire and this is anecdotal, but a lot of politics is anecdotal. I went to a high school 2 days before the New Hampshire primary Pete event. There was like people around the block and I interviewed them online and most of them said, yeah, I wasn't really considering him, but after Iowa and winning, I want to check him out. So it's like manufacturing consent
bias. It's like confirmation bias.
Right. Manufacturing consent is a real thing. I think, frankly, Bernie's campaign was asleep at the switch. I think they should have been in court challenging that. So, and people, I don't know if everybody knows this, but the DNC is actually a private corporation. It's not a governmental body. So essentially there's no real, their lawyer in court, if you recall the DNC fraud lawsuit from 2016, openly said, technically we could go in the back with cigars and choose the nominee. Yeah. So this had a really downstream effect. Pete, the polling bump Pete got, Bernie only won New Hampshire by a point.
Exactly.
And the media again spun that. So I think to me, if the results come out that night in Iowa, if it's basically tied, Pete doesn't get that huge bump. Bernie probably wins New Hampshire by 3 to 5 points. Then let's look at the other downstream effects. This is all shoulda, coulda, woulda, but I think it's likely. There's probably a lot more pressure on Elizabeth Warren to drop out after New Hampshire if Bernie wins New Hampshire a little bit more convincingly. She just lost Iowa. She lost the state that's in her backyard. So Bernie probably would have won New Hampshire closer to 4 to 5 points without this narrative that Pete Buttigieg won. From there, who knows? Nevada could have been bigger. Who knows if he would have won? There's a lot of other things that happened. But I think that overall, what my story shows, and there's other things in that private meeting, Iowa State Party members are basically grilling the attorneys. Like, what do you mean the DNC didn't cooperate? Like, what does that mean? How do you have an investigation without their cooperation? And the investigators were basically like, yeah, no, they wouldn't cooperate, but didn't really give any specifics. There was other things the Iowa State Party members openly said, like the DNC is trying to get rid of us. They want to strip Iowa of its first in the nation caucus status, which the people of Iowa take really seriously.
Yes,
they find it prestigious. But overall, I think if you read the story, it will show, we just had a fucking criminal investigation for 4.5 years into the Russian boogeyman. I wasn't necessarily against it. I was against the media propaganda surrounding it. But if you're going to have a criminal investigation into basically unproven speculation on Trump's ties with Russia, then why aren't we going to have a criminal investigation into actual proven? I've reported what the lawyer revealed. Why aren't we going to have a criminal investigation into what was Tom Perez's role into this? What was other executives' role into this? We also remember with this delay, there were people on Twitter that were just Bernie volunteers that were at these precincts posting their sheets saying, wait a minute, why is this precinct reported as going to, I don't know, Buttigieg or Biden when I have the sheet right here and Bernie won this precinct? So I don't even know if the actual numbers they reported were accurate because it was a gigantic mess. And I really think that was the point, Jen and Peter. I think the point among the DNC was to, they talk about Russia wants to sow chaos and confusion. I really think that was the point because, I mean, they're not stupid. They saw Bernie's campaign was even stronger from 2016 to 2020, more volunteers, more grassroots fundraising, better in the polling. They saw Biden's like kind of politically dead carcass limping along. They tried to prop up Kamala. That didn't work. Tried to prop up Pete. That wasn't working. They tried to prop up, everybody. So I really think, listen, progressives are exhausted. There's a pandemic. There's forced to vote. There's trying to get the real stimulus money. There's so many things. But at the end of the day, to me, I think all those other things are moot if we can't guarantee free and fair elections. Because, Jen, it's not only about electoral politics, but electoral politics is important. And I think looking forward, let's say it's 2024, hypothetically, it's Nina Turner as the candidate. If the DNC is not held accountable, if they're not removed from having any part of this, how do you assure thousands of volunteers that volunteered for Bernie and other campaigns, to be fair, millions of people that donated, how do you make sure they're not defrauded?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And again, the way I see it and the way I saw it, a while back, as Jen has built an amazing volunteer network around the country. We had people from down here that actually went up to Iowa. And I can distinctly remember speaking to a couple of them who said, we had a couple that spoke Spanish and they were going out to places outside of Des Moines. And they were already, prior to caucus night, dealing with issues of people being told to go to certain, locations for the caucus that were incorrect. They were already getting misdirection, and we were trying to get that word out there as fast and furious as possible. But talk about what I think is really the main issue here, and that is the power of the corporate media gatekeeper and how they stop a story like this from ever really taking shape, because we knew that things were going on. We know that if Bernie rightfully won Iowa, he would have caught so much momentum. And let me say this, by the time you get to Super Tuesday, but the time you get to South Carolina, if what had actually should have happened did happen, the weight of Buttigieg's endorsement wouldn't have meant nearly as much to Biden. That also would have played a role. And I think if Bernie had rightfully won Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada, it would have basically been a foregone conclusion. So please talk about what I still consider to be the biggest detriment to our movement on the progressive side really growing at this point, and that is the power of corporate media and how it influences people to ignore the things that really matter.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to look at corporate media just institutionally, the difference between corporate media and I'm just going to use me as an example and how I do things. So if you want to get to the truth of things, do you go ask for comment and ask for the truth or get your information from the politicians, from the DNC, from the police department? Because for years, Jen, you've been an advocate for criminal justice reform. Media just reported whatever the police told them, right? Right. So I do it the other way, where I get my information first and foremost from activists on the ground, from residents on the ground, from just citizen leaders. And you have to vet it. There's a lot of misinformation that goes on, but you generally get to the root of what's going on, not from your sources at the DNC or in the Trump administration or the Biden administration, but from people in communities. When I went to Flint for the first time, I didn't first try to speak with the mayor of Flint or the politicians. I spoke with the residents. I spoke with the activists, because that's where you find out where the bodies are buried. Yeah. So there's an institutional flaw, and it's intentional because corporations have bought the media, Thank you, Bill Clinton, for that. That basically, like when reporters are on the campaign trail, they're not actually with people. They're just following the candidates and the candidates' posse, their campaign advisors.
But, they're controlled with what they're allowed to say anyway. So all they're going to be allowed to put out there is what's been approved by that campaign and whatever the corporate donor allows. So it doesn't even matter if they're there or not there. They might as well not be there. I don't even see why they bother following them around. They're just going to repeat their talking points.
I can't tell you. I mean, I think I told Peter this story, but like when I was with TYT in 2016, I would go around covering Bernie, but I covered Hillary's campaign a bit. I covered Trump. I got the therapy bills to prove it. And I'll never forget it. I would just be in the crowd interviewing people, my cameraman with me in the crowd. And I was the only reporter in the crowd interviewing people before and after. Like I would look back and there would be the press stage where the cameras are, the reporters are, and they'd just be standing there on their phones. And in some, to their benefit of the doubt, also like they travel with the campaign and the candidates get there like late. But even when there was more time for these reporters to actually speak with people, they just didn't. They were just standing on the press stage, tweeting this. There is we talk about the disconnect between politicians and the people they represent. There's no connect at all between reporters and people. Yeah, they'll do their focus groups like on CNN and this and that, which are highly staged. They'll do their town halls where, frankly, these questions are scripted. But I mean, I can't even tell you. I mean, from Flint to other places I've been, even at press conference I've covered. Like I'm usually activist press conferences, not government press conferences.
Yeah,
I'm always one of the few people there. I remember there was a lead crisis in Cleveland. Nobody knows about it. Like 100 children had high lead levels in like 90 days. And activists created a press conference at the halls of City Hall. Even the local media wasn't there. I was there just because I was passing through. I was coming back from Flint. So Pete, you asked me about the corporate media. They are basically incentivized to ignore the people who know what's going on the ground. I found out what was going on in Iowa. I was there, but my sources were not coming from the DNC or the state party. They were coming from precinct chairs that were there. They were coming from not just Bernie people, but other campaigns that were seeing abnormalities.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.